Hey, welcome to the Gentle Rebel podcast. I'm Andy Mort. I'm a sound artist, songwriter, and slow coach. And I want to explore life's harsher edges with a spirit of playful creativity. I love helping people see the world through the lens of their unique creative sensitivities, rising above the cynicism, bitterness, and resentment that can disconnect us from ourselves, one another, and the playful possibilities within and around us. I look for ways to tune into our sound, process life's endless noise, express our creative voices, and explore the contours of human potential with openness, curiosity, and a shared sense of purpose. So in this week's episode, I'm really thrilled to bring you my conversation with cognitive psychologist and author Scott Barry Kaufman, whose writing I have admired for a very long time. He's the author of several books, including Ungifted, The Truth About Talent, Practice, Creativity, and the Many Paths to Greatness, Wired to Create, Unraveling the Mysteries of the Creative Mind, Transcend, The New Science of Self-Actualization, and Choose Growth, a research-based toolkit for turning challenging times into a springboard for healing, insight, and new beginnings. So really the main reason I wanted to speak to Scott on this occasion was to explore some of the recent research that has been looking at overlaps between things like vulnerable narcissism, high sensitivity signaling, and the sensory processing sensitivity trait itself. There's been some quite sort of interesting stuff being studied and responses going on around it, and some fascinating conversations happening. And I think it's really important to talk about, especially for those of us who, I guess, want the biological trait of high sensitivity to be, understood, taken seriously, reintegrated into the greater picture of human potential and survival and creative expression and exploration and all that stuff that I think is so important. I called this episode Sensitivity is Not a Superpower, which, controversial as that may be. It's something that Scott emphasizes a lot. He's written about this in a bunch of things that I've read that he has published. You know, the danger of using this kind of language to separate sensitivity from the whole, really, to create a sense of entitlement and exceptionalism around something which is really fundamentally just a natural trait, something that's completely normal, something that's innate to humans as a species. I guess it's understandable why this sort of language gets used. In a market economy where we prize separation of markets that can be sold to, this I guess superpowering language, this exceptionalizing of normal things, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not very good for us. It's not, in my opinion, the way to integrate a healthy and helpful understanding of this natural human trait into the overall picture or the overall body of humanity. In fact, I'd argue we need to conceptualize high sensitivity as the opposite of a superpower. Something very normal. It's a necessary normal that's been ignored and it's been suppressed to our detriment as a species. So we don't need highly sensitive people to rise up and take power and be this exceptional thing. We just need humanity to integrate sensitivity into the way that we collectively attune to environments, to our physical beings, to the way that we process information in and around us, and the way that we express what it means to be human, so that we can really move forwards and explore our potentials in a more three-dimensional, meaningful, and less kind of separated, disconnected, individualistic way, really. I'm going to stop talking there and just get right into it because the conversation was very interesting, and a huge thanks to Scott for taking the time to chat with me about all of this. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I'll be back at the end again to say a proper goodbye and wrap things up. Well, I am joined by Scott Barry Kaufman in today's episode, and I'm really excited for that to be the case. Hello, Scott. How are you doing?
Hey, Andy. I'm doing pretty well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah. So to give a bit of introduction about Scott. So he is a humanistic psychologist who explores the depths of human potential. He received his PhD in cognitive psychology from Yale University and a Master's of Philosophy in Experimental Psychology from the University of Cambridge here in the UK. He's taught courses on intelligence, creativity and well-being at Columbia University, NYU and the University of Pennsylvania, among other institutions. And he's the host of the Psychology podcast and has authored and edited a bunch of books, including his latest release, Choose Growth, which is a research-based toolkit for turning challenging times into a springboard for healing, insight, and new beginnings. In 2015, he was named one of 50 groundbreaking scientists who are changing the way we see the world by Business Insider. So that's Scott. Thank you so much for joining me. And I've been following your work for a number of years, so it's really great to have this opportunity to explore some of it on the Gentle Rebel podcast with you. So, yes.
Thank you.
I mean, the reason that I got in touch initially was around the topic of sensory processing sensitivity and some of the recent research in the field. I know you've been involved in a few projects. You've been involved in the Sensitive Men Rising film and various things. And you've been responding to some of the research going on in different ways. I've been very aware that there are a number of trends in the area of high sensitivity that I think are really worth highlighting and talking about. So that's really where I'd like to focus. But I guess to start, I'd love to hear a bit about your background and story, in particular, what sparked your passion for psychology and that exploration of the depths of human potential you mentioned, and where has that journey taken you so far when it comes to your research and work?
Well, I've certainly been interested in this topic my whole life. Even as a kid, in special education, I always saw the other kids on the playground who were kind of left out and wondering how much we're squandering their potential. And it's been a topic that I've always been interested in. So in undergraduate, I fell in love with the field of cognitive psychology and the field of human intelligence, and I started off studying intelligence, and then got into creativity studies soon after that, and then self-actualization and transcendence. That's been kind of the evolution of my career, but I think all of it relates to human potential. Yeah,
I could see that thread through the books that you've kind of authored and edited, that intelligence, human potential, creativity, all of that stuff. Yeah, for sure. So the first article that caught my attention, I think was it August, around the summer of 2022. There was some research titled, Do Highly Sensitive Persons Display Hypersensitive Narcissism? Similarities and Differences in the Nomological Networks of Sensory Processing Sensitivity and Vulnerable Narcissism. And Elaine Aron wrote a response to that piece and cited an article that you'd written for Psychology Today. Firstly, can you explain what this research was about and why Elaine Aron and others, including yourself, wanted to address some of the issues with it?
Well, I mean, the study, I want to say, first of all, the study was conducted, was led by a close colleague of mine, Emmanuel Jacques, who I've published papers with as well. And I know that he's a great guy and is really just curious about the truth of things and the complexities of personality. So I was glad he published that paper. It shined a spotlight on something we don't often talk about, which is, all these traits have a dark side as well as a benefit. And it depends on the context, and it depends on how we employ it with the rest of who we are, and the rest of our system and in our environment. So it really showed that there's a substantial correlation between self-reported highly sensitive people who report that they're highly sensitive, and certain characteristics of vulnerable narcissism. Vulnerable narcissism is a different trait than grandiose narcissism. vulnerable narcissism is sometimes referred to as covert narcissism. I think what's her name? The singer calls it covert narcissism. What's her name?
Taylor Swift.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
She calls it covert narcissism.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So don't tell Taylor Swift I forgot her name.
You're probably the only person in the world that has, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah, the particularly the overlap there is with a lot of characteristics like hiding the self and things that are more self-damaging than other damaging. You know, inauthenticity, fear of rejection, fear of criticism. These aspects of vulnerable narcissism. My other colleague, Elaine Aron, who I adore, she really did not like that study. She's very protective of highly sensitive people. She doesn't like when anyone says anything negative about HSPs. HSPs can do no wrong in Elaine Aron's eyes, and the highly sensitive people, view her as a mother figure in that way. And they love that she's so kind and caring about HSPs and so flowery in her praise of HSPs. I'm a scientist and I care about the truth, and and Manuel's research is very interesting. Elaine Aron is a scientist and cares about the truth too. I'm not contrasting myself from that, but I think that HSPs, I think there is such a thing as being too sensitive, and and I think that if you ever get into a kind of mindset where you feel like you can't do any wrong because of your traits, then I think that's a problem. That's a problem to be in that mindset. It's really good to understand the complexities of personality and ourselves.
So you wrote in your Psychology Today article about the high sensitivity signaling study. You said, while sensory processing sensitivity is a real trait, high sensitivity signaling is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And I've noticed in recent years a significant increase on social media and even in my university classroom, the declaration of high sensitivity as a strategy for obtaining special privileges and getting out of having to do difficult things. What was the nature and findings of that study? And it sounds like you were, I don't know, were you surprised by the findings or were you like, that makes sense?
I was definitely not surprised by the findings because you do see a lot of people who say like, oh, I'm so sensitive as an excuse to get out of doing hard things. And what was surprising was just how low the correlation was between actual HSPs and the high sensitivity signalers. There was really no correlation between those two things. And I think that is very interesting. While there is overlap between HSPs and vulnerable narcissism, you tend to be more damaging to the self than others. There really is no intentional exploitation aspect to it. There's a real neuroticism and internal sensitivity that can cause depression and anxiety. And I have a lot of compassion for that, for sure. High sensitivity signalers, that what was interesting is that was correlated with like even extroversion, like that wasn't like as well as exploit and a drive for exploitation. So I think that not everyone who says that they're a high sensitive person is a highly sensitive person. You see a lot of this nowadays with people saying, using trauma as an excuse for all sorts of bad behavior, and all sorts of these kinds of signaling things are now being rewarded in our society.
And why do you think high sensitivity has become one of those things that people would use in that way?
Because our society rewards it now. We're very like, in the name of compassion, like you're an asshole if someone, signals a weakness and vulnerability and you ignore it, right?
Mm.
I mean, so it's a good strategy if you're trying to manipulate people and exploit people. It's a really good strategy to play on people's compassion.
Mm. Mm. And what does that do to? Because I mean, what part of what I'm kind of interested to explore this is when you look at, say, the work that Elaine Aron has done for such a long time, and she put so much into the grounding of research and all of this
Yes.
stuff, and I look at what's going on and I just feel like that could all unravel around the term,
Well,
the trait.
that's what a highly sensitive person would say. Is like, there's that catastrophizing and that kind of like, oh, it's that such deep sensitivity and vulnerability that like, oh my gosh, if we have the slightest criticism, we're going to unravel. That's a real highly sensitive person mentality.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Are you an HSP?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, I am too. But I think what's gonna unravel, like that now everyone who says that they're HSP is going to be looked upon with cynicism. Is that the concern there?
I think
their concerns are not going to be taken seriously.
To me, it would be like it's not a personal concern about like me not getting taken seriously, but like the trait itself and, the work's done. And I know she's so diligent about like grounding it in the scientific kind of the brain studies and all of that stuff, that then it gets popularized and brought into the mainstream more. These terms are then understood in different ways.
Well, Elaine Aron certainly worried about that. She really hated the conceptual association between HSP and narcissism. She was really concerned that would dilute her brand. For lack of a better way of putting it. But look, I adore Elaine Aron, like I already said, and I think she's done a great job showing that this trait exists in humans. But it's just a trait. I mean, it's like people ascribe so much more. It's like the trait introversion. People ascribe, introverts are caring, gentle, kind, blah, blah. No, the creative, no, these are all separate traits. Introversion simply means you prefer quiet. You can be an asshole introvert. Trust me. You can be same with HSPs. With HSPs, you can be an extroverted HSP. There's just as many extroverted HSPs as introverted HSPs. People might not realize that. You can be a narcissistic HSP for sure. There's certainly potential for that. It's just being an HSP in and of itself. It's kind of neutral.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a superpower. People say it's the HSPs call it a superpower. But they write books about it and they say we have a superpower. It's like, I mean, look, any trait can be a superpower if harnessed in a good way. Anything. Yeah. The opposite. I mean, couldn't one make the case that the opposite of an HSP, boldness, and can be a huge superpower too, right? Like, if you put the two together, which one's a bigger superpower? I think that's actually up for debate. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just the truth of the matter. To be able to be stolid, have a stolid temperament, to not get so ruffled by everything, to be able, like that's kind of a superpower too, right? So I think that like all this like kind of flowery language is kind of corny and just not in line with the actual realities of the fact that all personality traits have benefits and disadvantages. Now, can HSP be a superpower under certain conditions, in certain contexts, and in the context of the rest of the personality structure of the person? I think absolutely yes, that is true. But so can any personality trait.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's part of what I'm really passionate about. It's kind of like just seeing it as that neutral thing. It's like the tracks along which we run, rather than add these sort of value judgments to it, and that language around it being super. It just becomes divisive, and it kind of goes down that road of treat me in a particular way because I am this.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that's not really helpful for anyone, and it annoys people. And yeah, I was kind of intrigued by that. So the scale that was used for the high sensitivity signaling had things like, I sometimes ask for privileges because of my high sensitivity. People treat me in a special way because they know how sensitive I am. When I mention I'm highly sensitive, others are more willing to help me, etc., etc. So it's kind of, I mean, I was like reading through the list. I was like, that's so alien to my own kind of, I guess, propensity to tell anyone that I'm highly, like, to use it in that sort of way. And it made me think, to me, it's like actually the purpose of knowing this stuff and of kind of grappling with it is to make, I guess, speaking to the human potential part that you touch on, is actually bringing the potential in humans up to the surface, allowing it to rise within an environment. And so when you've got highly sensitive people in that environment, it's like, okay, what conditions do we need in order to make it conducive to those people being able to flourish? And that's very different from you coming as a highly sensitive person saying, I need this and I need that.
Well, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I mean, sometimes it's good for HSPs to be assertive and tell people what they need, because people aren't mind readers. If you're an HSP and you really, your nervous system really gets frazzled under certain conditions, first of all, taking responsibility for that is important, and trying to manage your environment to minimize the need for others to accommodate you. But I also think that, as caring humans, it's good to know someone's an HSP and to be mindful of that. Just like I would want to be mindful of knowing more information about any of my fellow humans. That's, to me, that feels good to have that kind of compassion for fellow humans, and being an HSP really you can mean you react to the world differently and you feel things differently. But that's all just different than entitlement. I mean, most HSP, I don't know if I've ever met a real HSP who felt entitled to everything going their way.
No.
I think they really just want to be able to enjoy their day without feeling things so deeply. That's what they really want at the end of the day. The high sensitivity signalers, I'm just saying that's a whole different breed of animal. That's, there are real exploiters of the system out there. They exist.
What do we do about it? Because it's a cultural trend, isn't it? The what did you mention? The kind of
it is, yeah. I think that's right. It is a cultural trend.
Taking that victim position in all sorts of areas, which kind of puts everyone around you on eggshells and pandering. And again, it's not conducive to moving towards that human potential in the group, and for individuals within that group. It's yeah.
That's right. That's a good point. Your commentaries are spot on.
I probably need questions at the end of my commentaries.
Give me a little voice inflection.
Yeah. So let's kind of, as we move towards the end, kind of move into the themes of your book, like your latest book, Choose Growth. A research-based toolkit for turning challenging times into a springboard for healing, insight, and new beginnings. What's the vision behind that book? What are you hoping to do with that?
That was like a workbook that accompanied the book Transcend. So it was like a workbook to help people with their post-traumatic growth. I wrote it with a former student of mine who is now an amazing doctor, Jordan Feingold. And we wrote it during we started writing it, I think, 2021. The pandemic was still a concern for a lot of people, and we wanted to help to get people through those tough times. And it was really a book for the moment in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Yeah, practical
Mm.
workbook. Yeah.
And what are some of the challenges that you were addressing in that?
Uh, Being able to mentally see hope, for a better future, and to really get outside of ourselves and still experience transcendence and uh, like transcendent experiences. I'm a big fan of transcendent experiences, like awe and wonder
Mm.
and flow. Even with the world burning, I mean, it feels like the world's burning right now. Feels
Yeah,
that way.
it does. Yeah,
I think HSPs really feel it because they feel everything. So
in a big way. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. And it can feel like, yeah, where is that? Where is that hope? But there is also the transcendent experiences. I think I'm finding them in small things, like in just everyday life. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, just connecting with those little glimmers around. But
Yeah.
it can, yeah, it can be really hard. Like, what are some of your like transcendent go tos?
Um, I like writing. I mean, the flow state for me is really great. I like writing. I like playing the cello, singing, uh, uh, yeah, all sorts of creative activities really help me. Being with friends, being meditating on the beach,
Mm,
meditation. Yeah, yeah.
mm.
There's a lot of those things are my go-tos. But I like shared transcendent experiences too, like at a concert. You know,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
there's really these wonderful moments where people forget that they're supposed to hate each other because they have a different political opinion or some other kind of opinion. I love those moments where we forget we're supposed to hate each other.
Yeah. These
Do you know
opinions
what I mean?
you have to have, but actually, when you really think about it and you have those experiences, like actually these don't matter as much as they feel like they do when you're on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. I keep having those sorts of experiences as well. Just talking with people and realizing that actually people are generally pretty interesting and good. And when you experience them face to face,
Yeah,
it's very different
it's
to
so true.
if your only experience is online. Yeah.
So true. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many people just were just such assholes on Twitter, and then I DM'd them and got into a conversation with them, and they were like a completely different person. A lot of them were very deeply insecure.
Yeah. I
I
think
li-
that's probably the case. Yeah. Sorry.
Look, I really want to say I really think you've done a great job with your podcast. I really like your we have mutual interest in topics like creativity
Hmm.
and sensitivity and motivation and um being alive, what it means to be fully alive. I think you're doing a really great job with your podcast. It's actually I really like your podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, that's where I kind of go to, I guess, experience hope and express hope and
yeah,
process. I guess as a highly sensitive person, it's that the deep processing and then the creative expression, all part of the same thing, really. Um,
hmm,
and yeah, kind of turning the pain that you see as you're watching the world burn into something a little bit more constructive or creative or whatever. Yeah.
well, I think it's obvious that's your intention. I think that's
Mm,
really important. Yeah.
mm. That's cool. What are you kind of exploring at the moment? What are what's the areas of interest to you, maybe academically or professionally, but also, yeah, personally? I mean, you've just touched on some of the things you enjoy doing transcendently, but yeah.
Well, I'm really interested in how do we have more peace in the world, and I think a lot of it is going to be people need to overcome this kind of victim mentality that I'm seeing everywhere on every side of everything. And people aren't listening to each other. People aren't showing each other forgiveness and love and compassion. And I think that's a shame. You know, we've become so tribal, and we only see things through a tribal lens. So I'm really interested in research on victim mentality and vulnerable narcissism and self-actualization. And I created a form of coaching I call self-actualization coaching. And I'm really interested in using a lot of these tools to the tools of positive psychology, humanistic psychology, cognitive science, personality theory, and psychology to help people feel more empowered in their lives and really realize their full depths of their potential. Yeah.
And what when you use that term sort of potential, what does that mean to you? What are you describing?
Well, we have lots of potentialities, of course. When I say that, I mean like your highest potentials. You know, what are the things that are unique to you, only you, that are and that really can contribute in a really positive way to this world. In a lot of ways, I view self-actualization as really just a bridge to transcendence, as that's how Maslow put it. You know, like when done right, the goal of self-actualization is to erase itself. Because you know, we're part of the world, you know, and we have such a oneness with the world that we've lost ourselves because we've really made such an impact.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of, yeah, because I think sometimes that ideas around potential and success are so keyed into maybe extrinsic or external definitions of these things that you can feel like, okay, my potential is tied up in getting a certain result or something happening that's maybe beyond my control. And then you judge yourself against that. And it can feel like, oh man, I failed, or I'm a failure, even worse, like that. Again, that identity piece of it. How do we come to a more internally or intrinsically defined concept of success and kind of be okay with that?
I mean, that's a profound question, Andy. I don't know. I don't know. Only you can make peace with yourself. You know, it's the whole thing with self-actualization coaching is I don't tell you how to live your life. We try to figure out, you know, with me and the client, we try to figure out what life works best for you. And I think that a lot of people really don't want to take responsibility for their lives. They'd rather follow you know, watch the Huberman podcast and follow some protocols. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I love Huberman and everything, but I'm saying a lot of people would rather just follow a certain set of protocols than take the responsibility for their own existence and their own life. And I mean, I'm sorry, it's not a very satisfactory answer to what you're saying, but we do know the more that you live intrinsically, the happier you will be. If you stop the comparisons, if you do things that bring you joy, and just do things that bring you joy, and that's it. You know, you don't worry about it's got, you know, it's not worthy unless it gets this many likes on Instagram or all these other things. We know that you'll have a happier existence and more meaningful, more importantly than happier, a meaningful existence. But I think you and only you can make the decision that that's what you're going to value in this world. A lot of it, I think, comes down to valuing and what do you really value in this world, and also how much do you value yourself? And that's a very deep question.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it kind of strikes me that link again with what we're saying about connecting with with people in meaningful ways as well is part of that. Ironically, the kind of self-actualization, discovering that part of yourself that doesn't need the metrics of the social media likes and all of that stuff emerges when I would imagine, speaking from my own experience, like when you feel like you're contributing to something beyond yourself and you're connected in a way that's not just through the screen and through performance, based activities.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that it's really interesting. You talked about the sort of protocols and the rules. I've been thinking a lot about that recently, and the question of because it feels like we're in a really dogmatic, like we're desperate for rules. We're drawn towards, I need a dogmatic set of instructions for how to live. Like there's all these books like How to Live, Rules for Life, like all of these things that it's like there's an appetite there. There's people wanting that stuff, at least on the surface. It's like, I don't think that's what we need, but it's what we want. We want to be told, these are the ways to live.
We do. I mean, a lot of us do. It's the ones that don't are the ones that are telling others what to do. It's only two options you got. No, I'm joking. There's a third option, and that's follow your own path.
Yeah.
And don't tell people how to live theirs.
Yeah, that's it. And, talking about your coaching as well. Yeah. Again, as an industry that's like not regulated, it's very messy, that world of people telling people how, these are the rules, this is how you should live. And kind of trained as a coach, and the number one rule, quote unquote, is basically that's not what you do. Like, you are not there to tell people what to do or to give advice. It's like, no, it's that question-based approach that brings those values, brings the truth out of the person, so they can, I guess, you're really a mirror to that person's own self stuff. That it's like, yeah, that is who I am, and you're just enabling that to happen maybe a little bit faster or whatever. But the coaching world itself is,
wow, it's fascinating.
Messy.
It's truly messy. You're right, and I'm trying to tidy it up a little bit by being science based, and we're actually doing a 3-day coaching intensive December 8th through 10th, and we're really excited about that. We're really gearing up for that. It's next week. Oh my god!
Oh, great.
Yeah, next weekend for 3 days, we're gonna be training coaches and the foundational principles of self-actualization coaching, and it's all science informed, and I hope I can make some sort of contribution to the field of coaching in that way. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah. Where is somewhere people can kind of connect with what you do?
You just, scottbarrykaufman.com. I think I have everything there. The Psychology Podcast, the Center for Human Potential.com has our listings for our courses. Yeah.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time for this.
My pleasure. I really do love your podcast, and keep up the great work you're doing. The vibration that you're putting out into the world is people are resonating with it. Yeah.
Oh, well, likewise. Yeah. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and keep speaking into that stuff. It's great. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. A massive thank you to Scott Barry Kaufman for taking the time, sharing his wisdom, challenging a bunch of assumptions. I found it it was one of those, I found it a really cool, challenging conversation. And just really think the world needs voices like Scott's to have the courage to gently push back on these things and help us come to see what's underpinning our thinking, what is sort of reinforcing the views that we have about things and the world and everything. So to not ignore uncomfortable discoveries, so that we can ultimately progress our relationship with this stuff and explore the arenas of creative human potential together, not as a separate group of individuals, but as a species, as all of us, like exploring this stuff, understanding this stuff, especially this natural biological traits, like these are parts of how we've evolved as a species. These are parts of how we move forward. How do we kind of integrate that rather than kind of isolating it further or isolating it in a different direction? Not easy, but definitely necessary. Do go and check out Scott's books. His website, scottbarrykaufman.com. And if you'd like to continue exploring these ideas in a conversation with me, the best place to do that is The Haven. So if you go to the-haven.co, we explore stuff like this. We'll have a thread looking at this conversation in particular. On there, we kind of look at all this stuff with good faith and good humour. It's just a lovely space with friendly and encouraging gentle rebels from all over the world. So if you like the sound of that, do come and check that out over at the-haven.co. All right, I'll be back again soon for another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you are an artist. The world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Bye-bye.